So, I was babysitting two younger cousins at their home, which was about 100 years old, and it was also situated next to a graveyard. There wasn't necessarily a bad feeling in the house whenever we were there, but it was a bit creepy at night looking at all of the headstones. Anyway, I was helping the girls brush their teeth and whatnot before bed, and I headed back downstairs after they were in their beds and I had said goodnight. I sat down and almost immediately I heard a commotion of doors, not slamming but shutting hard, and the girls, I believe that there were around 4 or 6 at the time, talking loudly. When I got upstairs, they were at the end of the hallway, around a corner, and they were pushing their hands against the door to the attic as if trying to keep someone or something from coming through. "We gotta shut it! Help us shut it!" they half shouted and sort of half whispered. I'm already on edge because of the house, and the stories my aunt and uncle had shared with us regarding paranormal activity, and so when I put my hand against the old, heavy attic door, I absolutely freaked out when I definitely felt something pushing back from the other side. I paused for a moment in shock and then quickly and forcefully slammed it shut. And I mean, thank goodness, right? The girls thanked me as if this were like a normal bedtime thing for them, and went back to their rooms to go to sleep. As for me, I noped the heck out back downstairs. My aunt and uncle returned later that evening, and I mentioned it to my uncle as he drove me home. He just kind of chuckled and said something to the effect of, "Yeah, sounds about right." I have a few more incidences from this particular house if anyone's interested, but for now, that's my story, and it's by far the freakiest thing that I've ever experienced. When I was 17, I started to see a woman out of the corner of my eye, and it started happening more frequently. I should note that I had lived in this house since I was 5, and in particular, I always felt something in the basement and would absolutely bolt up the stairs every time that I was leaving it. Anyway, I started seeing her more and more frequently, but any time that I turned to get a good look, she was just gone. Then, one random night, I was sitting on the couch long after everyone had gone to bed, and I saw her again, but then she started chasing me, and I bolted up to the second floor where my bedroom was. I had to sleep with every light in my room on that night, and slept completely underneath the covers because I just knew that whatever was in the basement was now under my bed. I slept with the lights on every night for a week because I was convinced if I didn't that it would kill me. The paranoia and the lights on for days happened a few more times over the years, but only ever in that house and nowhere else. Honestly, I realize that it's very possible that it was just a psychotic break because the shadow figures in my vision still show up when I'm really, really stressed, and same with auditory hallucinations of people calling my name. But it's been about 2 years since I've had any though, and I've never seen a figure as clearly as I did that day. So, I was babysitting two younger cousins at their home, which was about 100 years old, and it was also situated next to a graveyard. There wasn't necessarily a bad feeling in the house whenever we were there, but it was a bit creepy at night looking at all of the headstones. Anyway, I was helping the girls brush their teeth and whatnot before bed, and I headed back downstairs after they were in their beds and I had said goodnight. I sat down and almost immediately I heard a commotion of doors, not slamming but shutting hard, and the girls, I believe that there were around 4 or 6 at the time, talking loudly. When I got upstairs, they were at the end of the hallway, around a corner, and they were pushing their hands against the door to the attic as if trying to keep someone or something from coming through. "We gotta shut it! Help us shut it!" they half shouted and sort of half whispered. I'm already on edge because of the house, and the stories my aunt and uncle had shared with us regarding paranormal activity, and so when I put my hand against the old, heavy attic door, I absolutely freaked out when I definitely felt something pushing back from the other side. I paused for a moment in shock and then quickly and forcefully slammed it shut. And I mean, thank goodness, right? The girls thanked me as if this were like a normal bedtime thing for them, and went back to their rooms to go to sleep. As for me, I noped the heck out back downstairs. My aunt and uncle returned later that evening, and I mentioned it to my uncle as he drove me home. He just kind of chuckled and said something to the effect of, "Yeah, sounds about right." I have a few more incidences from this particular house if anyone's interested, but for now, that's my story, and it's by far the freakiest thing that I've ever experienced. So I spent my late childhood and early adulthood in this house situated in a nature reserve in Brazil. Several weird things happened here, and there was like a snake that mysteriously showed up in my fully closed room, mind you. Missing objects here and there, trees that seemed misplaced from one day to the next. But one thing kind of stands out. Now, I should start off by saying that I'm pretty cynical, I guess. I'm an atheist and I don't really believe in the paranormal, myself anyway. I usually explain away all the stuff that happened. The snake, the crack in the foundation of the house, likely got in like that. Objects missing, I probably lost them outside the house. Trees moving, I just misremembered where they were. That said, this one was weird. So this one night, I was just staring up at the stars. A benefit of living in a nature reserve is the lack of public lighting, and my dogs started freaking out and barking. Now, it was a new moon night, so it was pretty dark, so I couldn't really see much. But the dogs really rarely barked unprompted like that. So I got up from where I sat to go check on what they were barking at. To my mind, it was probably just one of the little creatures we sometimes got visits from. Armadillos, mice, opossums. But man, I was way wrong. So at first, at the edge of the property, I saw what looked like a deer. The kind that I knew only was from like American horror movies, I guess, with antlers and stuff. That was really weird too, because to my knowledge, those don't really exist below the equator. But alright, I tell the dogs to shush, thinking something along the lines of, "Oh, it must just be the plants, nothing to worry about." But things start to move. You see, it actually stands up over the fence that we had there. Mind you, the fence was like 2 meters tall, so this thing is absolutely massive. And as soon as it's upright, it let out this sort of bleat that sounded like a woman's scream. In the split second that it did this, I just ran with the dogs inside the house and sheltered myself under the table. Eventually, I came out from there and looked around. But after that, I never saw that thing again. Thank God, too. And, needless to say, I didn't get much sleep that night. So some backstory first. I was fresh out of high school and found my first job working as a dialysis tech at an outpatient clinic. I'd always wanted to go into nursing and thought that this would make for some great experience while I waited to get into the nursing program at the local college. One of my co-workers at the clinic was also straight out of high school and interested in nursing, and we instantly clicked. This was around 2008, and shows like Ghost Adventures were all the rage. But we were both pretty hooked and would go to the local cemeteries at night and whatnot, looking for ghosts. The only thing that we ever really accomplished, though, was scaring the heck out of ourselves, to be honest. I'm not sure who thought of it first, but one of us got the bright idea to investigate the clinic that we worked at. Obviously, patients had passed away before during their treatments, so it seemed logical to me that they may still be there. So one night after work, we both stayed behind after everyone else had left. I started taking pics on my terrible digital camera, and she was doing the flashlight test trying to get a response. We got nothing. But after a while, we're just sort of mucking around and honestly about to give up when my friend starts calling out a patient of ours that had recently passed away while on the machine. She had been a sweet elderly lady who was also a DNR, and her death was actually pretty uneventful. Well, my friend tries to provoke this old woman and starts saying things like, "I never really liked you," when out of nowhere, an oxygen tank standing in a metal case began to shake violently on its own. The tank was literally standing by itself. Nothing near it was even capable of movement. I didn't know what to think, and to be honest, I really wasn't expecting anything, but to see this really shocked me. Needless to say, we got out of there and didn't stick around after closing anymore after that. I'm pretty skeptical of most things, but I have no doubt in my mind that something was there with us that night, and still cannot find an explanation as to how that tank could have possibly shaken itself like that without the influence of some unseen force. My younger sister and I have always dreamed of visiting New Zealand. Both of us being from the southeastern United States, New Zealand seemed like a perfect getaway where our favourite trilogy was filmed. So, with months of saving and planning, it was the spring of 2017 that we flew to Auckland, New Zealand for a grand adventure. It was the second day of our trip and we were about to head out from our Airbnb. Our gracious Airbnb host made us breakfast of bacon, eggs and toast. We were munching on the breakfast he prepared in silence until he broke the lull by asking us, "Hey, have you heard of the Pigman?" My sister and I sort of looked at each other, and then I responded with, "No, who is the Pigman?" Stu is his name, and he's kind, but he's a really peculiar guy with droves of pigs. If you take the 309 road, you'll pass his place and the pig's on your route to your next destination. It's quite the novelty if you're looking for something to do. "We'll make sure to add that to our trip," I said while sort of looking at my sister. "Would you ladies like some more toast?" My sister and I both said yes, knowing that we'd need the extra calories for the long day ahead. "You girls eat like farm girls," and he oinked at us twice. He said it in a playful tone, but again, my sister and I sort of looked at each other, but this time sort of exchanging curious glances. We thanked our host for our wonderful stay at his Airbnb, and we were on our way to Matamata. After what seemed to be only a few hours of driving, we come across a dirt road. The environment changed from only greenery and trees to old vehicles, other old structures embedded in the landscape, as well as an eye-catching feature, a plethora of pigs. The pigs appeared friendly enough to pet, but we were in a hurry, so we drove past the pig farm and onto Matamata. It wasn't long after that we had to take a sharp left onto a narrow road. Keep in mind too that this is my third day driving on the left side of the road ever, and in a Yaris, so my driving abilities weren't quite up to snuff. And as I'm taking the left turn, a small semi-truck was incoming at a rather unsafe speed. I quickly realized that we are either going into a full-on head collision or drive even further to the left to allow the semi-truck to pass us safely. I acted on the latter of the options, and within seconds, the Yaris's front and back left tires were trapped in a large set of potholes. My sister and I both sort of looked at each other in silence until she said, "Now what?" We did not have any cell phone reception, and the only full operable device that we had was a GPS, which didn't have any outgoing communication functionality. So, rather than panic, we get outside of the Yaris to assess how we can get the car out of the pothole. It wasn't long, too, before we saw a white utility van driving towards our seemingly helpless situation. We had mixed emotions about gesturing the driver of this van to stop. We were in a foreign land, about to rest our fate in a stranger's hands, and that just didn't really seem safe. But without even motioning the van to stop, the vehicle pulled over, and nothing really happened for several minutes. We patiently waited to see who would open the driver's door of the van, and when the driver finally presented themselves, it was an older man with white hair in his mid-60s, who appeared to be a local farmer. He looked at us with a smile, revealing a few missing teeth, as he walked towards us. My sister and I telepathically made the decision to allow this stranger to approach us, given that we had no other solution to our situation. The silence broke when he said, with what seemed to be an Australian accent, "G'day ladies, seems like you found yourselves in a situation." I put on a brave smile and responded with, "Yes, we have. We're figuring out how we can get the car safely out of the pothole without damaging it." I was conscientious in making sure to omit details about us being tourists, but I'm sure my accent and apparel gave it away to some extent. Well, I'm not sure I can be much help with that, but I can get you a lift into town for someone to tow the car. How about that? Well, I'd like to at least attempt in getting the car out before involving anyone else. Thanks. He looked displeased for a moment and then turned on a smile once more. Now, think. The three of us won't be able to get that car out of the hole. It would be best if you and your friend hop in my ride and we drive you to town. It won't take long. Without even needing to consult with my sister, we both knew that this was a bad idea. The man said with a bit more urgency and slight vexation in his voice, "The way I look at it, you're better off coming with me than staying here to see what others will do to you." We both were anxious and fearful of what he may physically do to us. Terrifying thoughts popped into my head, like if our family and friends would even hear from us again, or if newspaper headlines will read, 2 female travelers kidnapped and killed just around the pig pen. To our surprise, another van approached the scene and parked behind the old man's vehicle. It was a woman with grey hair and athletic build, about in her 40s or early 50s. "There you ladies are. I've been looking for you for the past hour or so." My sister and I had absolutely no idea who this woman was, but we followed her lead. She seemed far more trustworthy than this irritable Aussie. It wasn't long after the lady walked towards us that the Aussie shied away and made quickly to his vehicle. He hopped in his van and he drove off. "I saw from a distance that he was talking to you and it made you feel uncomfortable. Are you ladies okay?" the woman asked. We said yes and went on to explain how we ended up in the pothole. We told her that we were extremely fortunate that she showed up when she did. It was almost fate that we met this woman, in fact. She worked in construction and just so happened to have a board that we used as a ramp for the tires and a rope to pull the Yaris out as well. We successfully unstuck the car and thoroughly thanked our rescuer. We did offer her money, but she refused. She only wished that we heed her advice, and she told us to be wary of devilish pigs on your travels. Not all of them are as friendly as stews. When I was a 16 to 17-year-old girl, I would babysit for a set of twin 8-year-olds that lived across the street from me. It was the ideal summer job too. I ferried them to and from various activities, and in between, we spent nearly every second outside. Every day was a new adventure. Adding to the fun too, the twins' family owned a medium-sized sweet-as-pie poodle mix who loved people more than anything. This dog was incredibly smart, gentle, and loving too. She honestly wouldn't have even harmed a fly. We would count on her to go on adventures with us. She would follow us at a fast pace, exploring on her own, but would always keep us within earshot. Whenever we met new people, she would gleefully bound towards them, eager to lick them and get pets and express just how happy she was to see them. She was honestly the best dog that I've ever known. I remember one late summer morning too, we decided to spend a few hours drawing on the front driveway in chalk. The kids drew and rolled up and down the street on their scooters. And while I laid on the driveway with the dog, soaking up the heat, not many adults were around. It was a weekday and most were at work, but we couldn't have felt safer in the midday sun and the safety of our suburb. Occasionally a neighbor would walk down the street and the dog would slide up to them in greeting, while I spent a few minutes making small talk. This continued for a while, and I was getting really relaxed by the heat and the sound of the kids playing and laughing. The dog was resting beside me, dozing, when suddenly I heard a low growl coming from her. It was a noise that I'd never heard her make before, and it took me by surprise. I sat up and looked around immediately, and there, coming down the sidewalk towards me and the kids, was a man that I'd never seen before. He was older and a bit haggard looking, and he was watching us like a hawk. The dog was having none of him, and her growl slowly got louder and more intense as he meandered towards us. This should have been a sign to me, but I didn't know anything. I was 17 and too young to understand to trust my gut. All I knew was to be polite. He stopped, with a laser focus on me, and started trying to make conversation with me. This was normal, to be honest. I mean, other people had walked by and done the same thing throughout the morning. But he was asking weirder questions. Questions about our plans for the day, what I was doing with the kids, where their parents were, etc. It was unnerving, but he was an adult, so I tried to answer in as polite but vague a way as possible. He kept trying to get closer to me as well. The children were mercifully racing away on their scooters for most of this experience. And his gaze turned into something like a leer, maybe. Anytime he moved near, though, the dog would growl louder and she started barking viciously. I had never seen her act like this, and it actually got to a point where I was holding her back and trying to calm her down, all while apologizing for her behavior. He faltered in the presence of her, though. Even though she wasn't big, she was standing her ground and protecting me, even though the threat hadn't materialized in my mind. But just as quickly as he'd come closer, he backed off, said a quick goodbye, and hurried away down the street. I never saw this guy again, and in the many years I babysat for that family, I never saw their dog behave that way either. I've always wondered if she sensed some sort of threat from him that I wasn't able to pick up on that day. I truly think that she protected me and the kids from something potentially really awful. It could have been nothing, and I know all of you guys listening to this may think it's silly to even share this, but it's just an experience that I've never forgotten. I'm grateful for that dog, and I'm grateful that nothing else happened that day. So my friend lived in a super rural, small country town, and I'd come to spend the summer with her at her grandparents' house. We were both about 13 at the time, but we're both 22 now, and thought that it would be a good idea to sneak out and walk around the town, maybe stop by the park. As we were walking down this one road, about 30 minutes after we left the house, we noticed somebody following us, wearing all black with a hoodie. We both got pretty creeped out by it and quickly rounded a corner before hiding in the dark of some bushes. After the guy passed us and we waited about another 30 minutes, we decided that we should probably head back to a house, so we ran there. Once we got back inside, we couldn't really go to sleep, so we did an all-nighter. And the next morning, we saw on the news that a woman was stabbed, assaulted, and killed on the exact road that we had been on that night. We couldn't help but wonder if the attacker was the man who had been following us, but safe to say, we never did sneak out again after that. I had just finished high school and got a summer office job in the city 45 minutes from my hometown. My boyfriend at the time also had a job in the city and would give me rides to and from work. Unfortunately, this meant that I arrived up to an hour, maybe an hour and a half, before the office opened. This was before smartphones, so I'd normally sit and read out front by the fountain, waiting for my office to open. This wasn't the best side of town too. Mostly industrial buildings with a few gas stations and restaurants spread out, all near a major freeway intersection sort of overpass thing. I wanted to get an apartment closer to work and start community college in the fall. I just couldn't find roommates, and my boyfriend said that he'd rather commute to work than pay rent. I decided to go it alone despite my mum's fears of me living by myself. I found a beautiful 1940s brownstone, only a 20-minute walk or 10-minute bus ride to work as well. Being a broke teenager and liking the exercise, I mostly walked to work. I took the same route every day, cutting across a vast parking lot and entering the building from the side rather than using the sidewalk and front door. My office was a rented space in a large 10-story building with other businesses like telemarketing and call center offices. No doctors or lawyers or other businesses that would have in-person customers, so I rarely saw other people in the parking lot or surrounding grounds other than like co-workers or other professionally dressed office workers. But one morning, On my usual route, right before my shortcut, I spotted an adorable little fluffy white dog halfway across the parking lot. I was excited too and wanted to pet her on my way in. I was about to walk directly towards her when my eyes followed her leash up to the person holding her, and immediately something just didn't feel right. Time seemed to slow down because it felt like I had so much time to process so many details at once. He was older, maybe 50-ish, tall, large build, white, wearing a baseball cap, dark sunglasses, shorts and a t-shirt. It wasn't even 8 o'clock in the morning at this point, and I wondered what he was doing in the parking lot. There was nothing nearby, and he wasn't anywhere near the grassy areas. He seemed to be urging the dog in my direction almost, and sort of stowed in by a white windowless van that had the back door open. I turned and walked the opposite direction, taking the sidewalk around the front of the building. My office wasn't open yet, so I practically ran up the stairwell to my floor, and for some reason went up to the next landing. I could see the hall through a small window in the door. I waited, heart pounding, and after a moment, I started thinking that I was just being paranoid. But then, I saw him, carrying the dog and trying the doors, which thankfully were locked. Obviously, I was terrified. He checked the stairs next, and feeling stupid for trapping myself when the only way out was down, I couldn't go down without him seeing me, so I went up a few more stairs to hide and waited, and then I heard the door open below me. Adrenaline filled my body as I looked down, only to see a co-worker coming out to smoke. I rushed past them and into the office. I was still on edge, but I didn't want to sound silly, so I didn't mention the encounter. An hour goes by, and I decided that I needed a break, still feeling uneasy. I glanced down the stairwell before heading down. I see him again, just exiting the building at this point, which means that he was waiting for me the entire time. I'm so freaked out at this point that I just run back inside and tell the office manager everything that happened. I don't know if she took it seriously, but she said that she'd keep an eye out and let others know. I also had co-workers drive me home that day, and I never took the same route to work ever again. I'd leave at different times each day and enter the building from different doors, anything not to be predictable. I never did see the man or his dog again, but I learned a valuable lesson. Always be aware of your surroundings and trust your gut. If you feel like you're in danger, then you probably are. This happened at the end of the first quarantine, about late July or maybe early August. IKEA had said that they would be accepting a mass of customers, and my mother said that she needed to go and get some stuff we had previously not been able to get. At the time, I lived with my mother, brother, nan, and grandfather. They all get up early, so they wanted to go as well. I, however, wanted to just stay in bed because the line would have been like 2 hours long. And when the time came for my family to leave the house, my mother came into my room and told me that they were going to IKEA, and I, being half asleep, just sort of agreed with everything and didn't think much of it. But something felt off. I just had this gut feeling as if somebody was standing over me. But now that I think of it couldn't have been my mother because I could really hear her outside my door. In any case, they left the house and I was left alone for about 4 hours. For the first 2.5, I just sort of played on my PS4 with my friend. But I then heard the distinct sound of the front door being unlocked from the inside. But the outside and inside make different sounds. I thought that this was odd because I had one headphone off my ear just to hear when they got home, but it was still creepy how it was clearly being unlocked from the inside. I heard no noise for the next few minutes, so I went down to say hello, but the door was still locked and still nobody had got home. After about 10 minutes, I was still playing on the PS4 while telling my friend about it, when I heard my bedroom door open and felt the wind that it normally makes when it opens. I turned, but still there was nobody there. Now, though, I was really starting to get freaked out. I thought it might have been from the lack of sleep that I was getting at the time, or just my imagination or something, and nothing happened for the next hour. Because I'm a junk food loving teenager, though, I constantly was going downstairs to get drinks and snacks and stuff. But the last time I did it was the part that left me just absolutely terrified. You see, I walked downstairs to get my food and drink. For some reason, I always have the feeling that someone is always behind me when I'm going up or down the stairs, and I started to walk back up them. As I reached the top of the stairs, I have to look down a hallway to my left, but I could see my door over the ledge before fully getting up the stairs. And that was when I saw, well, me. At my door, slightly cracked open with me, there just staring. It had the facial structure of me and the same hair, but the facial features were a little bit different. In any case, that was enough for me. I ran out of the house and didn't go back in until my parents got home. Now, most of you probably won't believe this because I know it sounds like a common fake story, but it was there, clear as day, and that's why I'm scared of being home alone now. Too many unexplained things have happened in my house while I'm home alone, and it's left a scar in my brain. But this one, it definitely sticks out. This one was the worst by far. This one is burned into my memory.